The task force report also talked about linking responsibility to accountability, to somebody being answerable for the outcomes that we wanted to have. Now, it's very interesting that the discussions today have been expanded by our current Minister of Education through, from 1999 right through, we see a link between then and now. But Minister Holness has added a few very interesting and important dimensions to the argument. And in particular, he speaks about being morally accountable. And I think this is something that we cannot and should not miss. Yes, we have all the accounting things and the auditing things and so on, and the responsibilities built in. But there is also now a moral responsibility to ensure that we get value for money, that we raise outcomes for children, and that the profession, and this is the next one, the professional accountability is now very important. And this is part of his argument. Somebody should be held accountable, and accountability doesn't mean punishment or sanctions. Accountability really means that someone must find a solution. And I think this is where we should be at in our thinking about the different forms of accountability. What is it that we need? Yes, there is the process that we must engage in, but what are the outcomes? We need to find solutions. We need to consolidate the profession, the teaching professions, professional accountabilities, paradigm and framework. Now, a few things, I won't go over one or two of the things Minister said about the National Education Inspectorate, because I think that is quite clear. But I think the issues that we need to address, I'd just like to point them out. The performance and educational outcomes for our children is unsatisfactory. Teacher performance, when linked to student outcomes, in many cases, this leaves much to be desired. Funding of education is expensive on the national pocket. Are we getting value for money? Compliance with regulations, there are some failures there. Governance matters in relation to interpretation and the implementation of educational legislation also is an issue. And reliability and probity, to a lesser extent. Can educators, this is one of the questions that is being asked in certain circles, can educators be trusted? Because we have had things like extra lessons and marking and assessment where people are bumping up grades and so on. Can we be trusted? Can what we do and say be seen as reliable? And finally, in regard to inspecting as part of the accountability framework, how can we ensure that inspections are not just a process, but that they so take on board outcomes for all? And in looking at that, the model of inspection, we need to answer the questions: what do we expect students to know and be able to do? How satisfied are we that students have mastered the established content standards? How are teachers prepared to be effective in the classroom? And how and to what degree is the public informed about school results and the contributors to those results? And how does society respond to the information that we give out, which makes all of us responsible and accountable? I have some further challenges as I enter into looking at what the National Education Inspectorate should do and should be about. Is there a link between inspections and the quality of school performance? That's a big question. Will schools be driven to window dressing once we've been in there? How do we avoid the profession collectively feeling that accountability is about witch hunting, an issue that was just raised by former president of JTA? And more than anything else, how do we get the profession to consolidate their professional responsibility and accountability to themselves? Because if we don't get that part right, we're going to be in the business probably of losing more teachers than we can afford to lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foster Allen. We now turn to Dr. Minot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I will put a twist on an expression. And you see what I mean as I go through it. It is this. This devil is into detail. This devil is into detail. And I start my presentation with the question, what can be done to take hold of Jamaica's grades 9 to 11? And I want to quote something that was written by our think tank some time ago. In a word, several of Jamaica's high schools and teachers are out of control. That was the thesis statement of the Minot Report of 2005, which was an empirical study of 980,000 records relating to the 2001 to 2004 period of CXC June exams, whether they were CSEC or CAPE. Beside that, we got a considerable amount of information on school censuses and related data that informed the body of work that we presented then. The AQuest think tank has seen no empirical or quantitative evidence to vary that assertion in the 3 years since 2005. This is despite obvious improvements in high school teacher emoluments and to school infrastructure over the past 10 years. Let me just say this, because of what AQuest does, we're able to draw on about 7 or 8 young PhDs or PhD candidates every year to take a hard look at the educational system from which they have been coming. And they do this free of cost. They come up to my place for a 2-3 week period, and we brainstorm and we work with our computers. Back to my text. To make matters worse, the nation's Ministry of Education seems resigned to its own organizational ennui in face of a systemic culture of obfuscation and shoddiness that pervades most accounting for academic performance, especially in grades 9 to 11 of our high schools. We submit that in order to meet national educational objectives, there needs to be a rigorous framework of accountability designed to continually monitor and guide the several lines of ministerial policy towards effective implementation. For the limited purposes of this panel discussion, we make the following 7 recommendations regarding better accountability for schooling students in grades 9 to 11. Again, I repeat, this devil is into details, practical details. Recommendation 1, measures of school or individual teacher production, to use an intuitive industrial term, be based on the value added to each of their charges, each of their students. And to accomplish this, each child would have to be assigned a unique identifier. And we think it should be based on his or her birth certificate number.